So, welcome back, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you here. And it's my honor and pleasure to once again have Dr. Andre Sane with us. He is going to talk to us about his experiences with treating patients with cancer and where things may be not proceeding the way we would like them to, dealing with obstacles and whatever other questions you might have. Dr. Sen is ready to go, so let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Well, there's a lot to say, and we have only 1 hour, so I'll focus on certain particular subject. However, I will leave time for question. How much time shall I leave for question at the end, Jeff?
Well, we actually scheduled for an hour and a half, so you can, if you end at about 9, then we'll have plenty of time for questions.
Perfecto. Okay, very good. So, listen, the rules for treating people with cancer, and in your case would be animal, is the same as for any other patient. So it's the same. The rule don't change, the rule of homeopathy. It means individualized remedy, of course, optimal pathology, of course, optimal follow-up of scheduling, optimal follow-up scheduling. Okay, let me explain some of these. Let's go over the individual remedy while you understand. That has to be based on the totality of the symptom and the genus of the disease must correspond to the genus of the remedy. The genus of the disease is based on the totality of the characteristic symptom. So we go from the totality of symptom and we say what's most striking in this case. And when we say totality of symptom, we mean all the symptom. I'll try to adapt to veterinary medicine, all the symptom of the animal since its birth, and also all the and also during pregnancy perhaps. So it means all the symptoms that have been noticed in the animal since its birth. And so once you have all the totality of symptoms, then you say what's most striking in this disease and the disease of this animal, and then you say you extract all the characteristic symptom and you organize them in a hierarchy, and that will be the genus of the disease, and that genus of the disease will be the way to find your way to the mathematica. So then you would first repertorize your most characteristic symptom. So you may have 1, 2, or 3 very characteristic symptoms. So these are called guiding symptom or leaders or keynotes, and then you look in the mathematica which remedy, through the repertory, which remedy will have this, and then you'll come down to a group of remedy. And the remedy that will best fit the totality of the characteristic symptom will be the one that would be studied first. So you'll go to the mathematica and study the remedy, and the ones whose genus is closest to the genus of the disease is the one that you will prescribe. Okay, so let's go over the optimal pathology, which we did in a prior webinar with your group in 2016, last year. So we'll just go over very briefly. Optimal pathology means optimal potency. That means the potency must be individualized, like the remedy must be individualized. Optimal repetition. So you don't want to consider the minimum repetition. It's not a case, healing is not related to how little you have given the remedy, is how quickly the person has recovered. So the concept of minimal dose is irrelevant when we're talking about speed of healing. So it has to be optimal repetition and optimal medium and way of administrating the remedy. When we say medium, it means some patient will be by olfaction, other people will be by globule, other people will be, or animal, will be by water. And you could, in water, you could administer a drop, you could administer a teaspoon, or you could use, like I use, maybe in probably 30% of my patient by a toothpick, which is very easy to do. Very good. Optimal follow-up scheduling. So this is very, very important because you need to follow your patient at the right time. You cannot say, take this remedy, we'll talk in 2 weeks, and the patient, after 5 days, they start to relapse and they have 10 days of being worse before the next appointment. That's not right. So that's not the way to do it. You have to schedule at the appropriate time. So it could be anywhere from hours to weeks. So you can say, I will talk to you at the end of the day, take the remedy now, and I'll talk to you at the end of the day. Or it could be in a certain patient, they're doing very well. Like today, I had a patient, she called and she had her 2-week follow-up, and she called the secretary and she said, I'm feeling great. It's a patient with stage 4 lymphoma. She said, I'm doing great. I didn't talk to the patient. She just talked to my secretary. My secretary told me, she says, I'm doing great, so I don't need the appointment. I'll postpone by another 2 weeks. So, but it was the right thing to do to schedule her for 2 weeks, even though she has the possibility to postpone if she's doing well. So it could be anywhere from hours to weeks. If there's pain, it is dealt as if it was an acute case. So if you have a patient with pain because of the cancer, so it would be very common with metastasis. It would be very common with an inflammatory type of cancer, a fast-growing cancer. So you will have pain, and pain will be considered as an acute case. So you'll schedule the appointment. You'll give the remedy and you'll schedule the appointment in hours following the intake of the remedy, or the next day or two, depending how intense is the pain. If there's any energy or mood problem, let's say the patient has very low energy or they're depressed, it is dealt as a subacute, and it could be the next day or in a few days. To give you an example, on Friday, I had a patient, or Thursday, Friday or Thursday last week, I had a patient who found out about his report, the blood test report, and he found out that his marker went up. It's a patient with esophageal cancer that his marker barely went up. So they just minimally changed. But he learned from the secretary, because he called, he said, did you receive my blood result? Yes. He says, can I have a copy? Yes. So she emailed the copy. So when I talked to the patient, he already knew the blood result, and he got depressed. So I think that was Thursday, actually. It was Thursday or Wednesday, maybe Wednesday next week. So I said, okay, and the pain was worse. So he had more pain, more symptom in the epigastrum and so on. So I said, okay, repeat the remedy now. If there's no change by tonight, take it, repeat it again. And if there's no change by the morning, take a third dose. I talked to him and said, there's no change. So in this case, the problem was a mood problem because he was depressed from the result. So I had to give him an intercurrent remedy. And then I say, take this remedy, and as soon as your moods are better, you take your remedy for that you've been taking the chronic remedy. So he took this remedy for the moods on Friday, and on Saturday took his remedy for the his chronic remedy. And I talked to him on Monday, and he says, all is better. The moods are better. My moods lifted right away when I took the second remedy, and when I took the first remedy that I've been taking on Saturday, the pain started to go quickly, and there's been no pain since Saturday. So here, it was a few days follow-up. Okay, totality of the symptom means all the subjective symptom, all the objective symptom, and with animals it's mostly objective, and the past medical history. So you have to have something. When you have past medical history, let's say the animal has had an abscess and has had an infection here and has had a growth here and had a skin problem there, you want the remedy, the best remedy for that animal will be the one that has also all the lesion that the animal has had before. That would be the best remedy for this animal, likely the best remedy for this animal right now. So that's why it's very, very important to have the past medical history and family history, because if there's a tendency in family to have certain problem, it's less, and all member of the same problem, so it's less individual to this individual, so it's less important. But if it's the only individual in the family that have a certain problem, then their problem or their characteristic symptom become more important because it's unique in the group. Objective symptom. Of course, we have all the tumors. If you have a tumor, you would look at the size of the tumor, the consistency of the tumor, the heat, the temperature of the tumor, the skin around or the tissue around what it feels like. You would measure the exact size. And any other objective symptom you may have, you will have to look, like in human, we look at nails, we look at teeth, we look at tongue, we look at the eyes, we look at the pulse, the urine. So there's many objective symptoms. And it's interesting, this summer I spent about 6 weeks reviewing or analyzing, I should say, Lipe's cases, his best case. And I did maybe 50 of his best case, and it took about 150 pages of analysis. I wrote about, maybe 100 pages of analysis in any case of his 50 case. And it's very interesting, a lot of his prescription were based on objective symptom, like a vet would do, actually. Okay, so you have all those objective symptoms. The complexion of the patient is very important. Any swelling there might be, but also others that are easy to do and very reliable, such as a CBC, chemistry profile, very useful to follow the progress, to see for prognosis if the patient is improving or deteriorating, inflammatory markers, tumor markers. So let's look at the CBC. So first, the complete blood count is very useful for prognosis. So there's many aspects in the blood and the CBC that will be useful. First, the hemoglobin. If the hemoglobin goes down, usually it's the patient is not doing well. But sometimes it could be the rate. You look at the rate. So if it's already going down and you treat and the rate start to stabilize, then that could be a good sign, even though it went down. So you want to look at sometime more than just one reading. But if the hemoglobin consistently goes down, that means you're losing the battle. The red blood cells, similarly, if the red blood cells start to go down, you are similar to the hemoglobin. Hematocrit, same thing. Absolutely, lymphocyte count is also very useful. Here it says in yellow, the absolute lymphocyte count is proven to be an independent prognostic factor for survival, independent of cancer type, and it is included in several validated prognostic scores such as IPS and advanced, I think HL is lymphoma. In any case, the absolute lymphocyte count would be one way to look at it. So if you start to see that it's dropping, that means it's not a good sign. It goes below 1, 0.8, 0.6, 0.5, you're not doing well. On the other hand, you treat the animal, in your case, and you start to go, it goes from 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 1, 1.2, you know you're doing well in terms of pathology, the degree of similarity of the remedy. The other one would be the monocyte count, similarly. So here you say is an increased monocyte count in the peripheral blood is considered a predictive factor or of poor prognosis in cancer patients. So again, so you look at the numbers there, and that would be useful. Another one that I find is most useful, probably the most useful of all, is the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. It's probably the most reliable, more precise, more refined test, because it's a really precise test, and it's really, I find it very useful. It's you can corroborate it with any other tumor markers and inflammatory markers. It's a really good one. So here you see it says prognostic role of neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio in solid tumors. So a high neutrophil lymphocyte ratio is associated with an adverse overall survival in many solid tumor. The ratio is readily available and independent and inexpensive biomarker. Oh, very, very cheap. That's true. Another one that it's a bit less reliable, but it can be also useful, is the platelet lymphocyte ratio. Same thing. It's associated with tumor progression. So if you see the lymphocyte going up, one of the reasons, and the lymphocyte going down, so it's typical in cancer, the lymphocyte go down because the lymphocytes are the one that will have a great potential to destroy the tumor. So what's happening is the tumor that has quite an intelligence and will hijack the immune system, and will use hundreds of strategy to fool the immune system and to detract the immune system to its own benefit. So it will send signal to decrease the number of lymphocytes, or sometimes it will even recruit lymphocyte to destroy the good lymphocytes. So it's pretty amazing. And also it will, to its own benefit, it will increase the platelets, level of platelets, because platelets will increase. Platelets has all kind of growth factor. So they carry a lot of growth factors, so they will increase the platelets to its own benefits so they can grow faster. Yeah, so prognostic role of platelet to lymphocyte ratio in solid tumor. So it says conclusion, a high platelet lymphocyte ratio is associated with a worse overall survival in various solid tumor. Chemistry profile. There's many things in the chemistry profile. The albumin will be one. That's always a very reliable one. The albumin will not change until they start to be likely cachexia. But if you start to see the albumin going down, you know that you have to have a very good treatment to bring the patient back. So it says serum albumin level provide useful prognostic significance in cancer. Currently, serum albumin level could be used in clinical trial to better define the baseline risk in cancer patient. So that is more when you have advanced cases. And but if you see the albumin going up, you know, let's say it's down when you start the treatment and it starts to go up, you know, whatever you're doing is very favorable for the patient. One that I use, not just on cancer patient, but on almost every patient that has a serious chronic disease, is the copper-zinc ratio. I use this one, but all the patients with cancer, I follow them very, very, very closely with this. What they found out is this: here they took patient with head, face, brain, neck, you know, eye and ear tumors, and they look at their level of copper while they were having the tumor. And then what they did is they removed the tumor. If they were able to remove the tumor, the next day after removal of the tumor, the copper level goes back to normal. And when they follow the patient, they find out that in patient that the tumor came back, before they could perceive the tumor, the copper had already come back up to almost the level of when it's detectable. And what happens is the tumor will secrete certain factor to increase the copper in the blood and decrease the zinc in the blood. And to its advantage, because the tumor needs in its microenvironment around itself high copper level in order to grow and develop blood vessel and to multiply, and as well as it needs high copper level to send satellites, metastasis away. Without high copper, they cannot do that. So it will to be able to do that, it will do this. And this is a very good one that I do on every 12 weeks with patient with cancer. We do a copper level, a copper zinc level. So here it says the plasma copper zinc ratio is a biomarker as predictor of all cause of mortality in elderly population, not just patient with cancer, all causes. See, it says here, plasma copper zinc ratio was associated with all the inflammatory markers studied as well as the serum albumin. So it increased with age. I think I have another paper on it. No. So I do have other papers on this, but it's all saying the same. So in patient with cancer, absolutely, this is followed very closely. And the good news is by giving zinc, oral zinc, you can decrease the copper and you can change the copper zinc ratio, and that will change the environment around the tumor, and that will limit the tumor to be able to grow around and to multiply. Next is urate. So urate is uric acid, and is another prognostic factor. So if you start to treat your patient and it's high and it starts to come down, you know you're doing something very good. Yeah, like just last week with a patient that the urate level went from about 8 or 900 to 600 in about 2 weeks. And we knew, and the patient said, I feel so much better, but we knew from the blood test, the uric acid test, that it was not just palliation. Here we knew that there was a drastic change in the patient, and we could see it also on the CBC. But the most dramatic was the, I think it was like 960, and it went down to 690 or something like this, like quite dramatic, just in a 2 weeks period. But you will see that with urate when the patient is doing well. LDH is useful, especially with lymphoma. So that's we'll talk about that. Liver enzyme with one patient that different type of cancer, but if they have they start to be overloaded with dealing with the tumor necrosis. When the tumors are big, they start to have necrosis. The liver enzyme will go up, and if they go up as you're treating, that means the patient is not well. Also, if they do chemotherapy, it will go up. And so if you treat them, you want those enzymes to come down. So there's many aspects of the chemistry profile that can be used. Let's look at inflammatory markers. Inflammatory markers. So the first one is sedimentation rate. So can be useful in certain type of cancer. I have 2 patients with lymphoma right now. I'm trying to think. One is stage 4 lymphoma, and her SED rate, I'm trying to remember the SED rate, it was like 120 about. And slowly over time it's coming down. Now it went down to 90 and 80 and 70 and so on, and just constantly go down. So that means the patient is doing well. Similarly with another patient that has, what did he, he has he has a rare type of lymphoma. Same thing. SED rate is very useful. It's very cheap to do, and in this case, we can follow the change very easily. C-reactive protein. It will depend the type of cancer, but you will have a number of case of cancer where the C-reactive protein will be elevated, and it's all around. It's a cause of mortality. So if you have a positive C-reactive protein and you treat and it starts to go down, you know you're doing well. So it's very, very useful test. Homocysteine, certain type of cancer will be high, like I had a patient with cancer of the tongue. His homocysteine was out of out of the very, very high was maybe 30 or 40, so quite high. You know, cardiologist wants to have almost 16 at about 8, and above 12 or 15, depending on the lab, it's elevated. But this patient, I think, was like 35 or 38, and start to come down dramatically after taking being treated. So here it is, almost almost a risk factor for cancer, and another tumor marker. Maybe use as a more accurate tumor marker for monitoring cancer patient during treatment. Very useful in certain cases. So you check if it's positive, you use it. If it's not there, you don't need to test it again. Ferritin will be elevated also in certain type of cancer. So useful. So serum and inflammatory marker. So I always run ferritin at the beginning, and if it's normal, we leave it alone. But if it's high, we follow closely. Then you have no, we don't need to do that. Specific tumor markers. We have CAA. CAA is a general tumor marker, especially with rectal and colon cancer. It can be also high in other type of cancer like breast and lung cancer. So it will be elevated in a number of type of cancer. So useful. LDH we talk about in lymphoma, specifically more lymphoma. You have PSA with cancer of the prostate. If you have a patient with a cancer of the prostate, they say today that it's not useful to use the PSA. Yes, for conventional medicine, it's not useful because it can be misleading. You could have a high PSA level and very, very low cancer of the prostate that will not threaten the life of the patient. And you can have a low PSA and have a very aggressive cancer. However, to follow up the patient, I find the PSA is very useful. So if I do a treatment and the PSA start to come down, we know we have done something very positive. But if the patient say, I feel great, but the PSA is still climbing, especially you can measure the velocity of the growth of the PSA, and therefore you would know if it's better. So it can still grow, but you would look at the velocity of it. Like I'll show you. Maybe I'll come out of this to show you the velocity. Just I'm not sure if I can. Yeah, probably I can't. I can do it. Let me see. Yeah, I see you'll have a. Here it says you see you have a website. It says enter your PSA. You put the date, you put the PSA, and then you add, and then you do it again, and then you'll have a velocity. It will give you a velocity. How quickly it's climbing. So you check this velocity. On the as you're treating the patient, and if the velocity is going down, then you know whatever you're doing is working. PSA, that was for PSA. There's other marker like 15.3, 15. Yeah, there's a number of tumor markers. Yeah, let me see. I will just show you the page here. Let's go over back here to this page. Yeah, so here it says National Cancer Institute tumor markers. Look at the number of tumor markers there are. It's just a great number of tumor markers. And the more we go, the more we find tumor markers. So there's all kinds of tumor markers that can be used. And once you find the tumor markers, then you follow the patient appropriately with the tumor marker. Okay, etc., etc. Now, this is I believe this is my last slide. Yeah, this was my last slide. I didn't know how long it would take, but I thought you would have a lot of questions. So, but let me see if there's anything else I can tell you about follow-up. Now, there's always the pain. There's always the the general well-being of the patient, and the blood test like I showed you. So these are all very important for follow-up. There's other things we do in human that I don't think you can do in you cannot do in animals, but I will show you because it might be interesting for you to know. Let me see. It would be this, something of this nature here. It's meditation associated with regression of cancer. Ainsley Mears is a psychiatrist from Australia that went to Nepal in the 60s and met a saint who showed him a form of meditation that he has used in practice, and he found that he had about 10% regression of patient with terminal cancer. In other ways, he was treating them like in a hospice setting where patients were terminal, and they would be referred to him to deal with the pain, the nausea, the depression, the anxiety because they were dying, and he would have them do his form of meditation, and he had 50% of the patient respond. He had about let me see, 10% that complete remission, and he had another 10% with partial remission. So let's see, there were some cases, for instance, like no, not this one. Yeah, like remission of massive metastasis from undifferentiated carcinoma of the lung associated with intensive meditation. He has a number of papers that he published. I don't have all of them right now, but I have a like a intensive meditation treatment of terminal metastatic cancer. So that's another thing that can be done for a patient with cancer that would be useful to do, just to help them. You can use it to control their pain, their anxiety, and their depression, but at the same time, it will help the immune system to fight the cancer. So just by itself, without other treatment, Mears was able to have about a 10% regression. Let's see if we can find. I think it's this one. What can cancer be? Yeah, here it says a 10% chance. No, that's not what it is. 20 session.
Yeah. Read it. Keep going.
A bit further. The result indicates that patients with advanced cancer have a 10% chance of regression of growth. There you go. At 50%, they will be better. They'll be improved, the quality of life, but 10% of regression. Complete regression here, we're talking. And there's another paper that says even better. They have partial regression and 10% complete regression. And we're talking about like advanced case. I'll show you one of advanced case. Like this one. Here is a patient with sarcoma, like osteogenic sarcoma, that was spread to the chest. Look at this, spread to the chest. And here is a 30-year follow-up. And he did it with the meditation, with intensive meditation, diet and meditation. So of course we always use diet, like Hyman said. Throughout his teaching, Hyman said, you always have to make sure that you give the proper diet, proper healing environment, sun, exercise, fresh air. You have this patient walk every day. So this is things that can be useful to. Oh yeah, one thing I want to show you is this thing here. Hold on a second. Maybe I have something I put aside. Let's see if I put aside for the end of. Yeah. Yeah. Here. Let me put this a bit bigger here. Yeah, when the picture changed sufficiently during treatment, the patient with acute and chronic disease, particularly when the complications present themselves, or due to the appearance of a mishap or intercurrent disease, we should address these newly presenting pictures until the patient is completely recovered. And that's the point that I was making when I said the patient last week stopped responding to the remedy. The patient with cancer of the esophagus stopped responding to the remedy, and he started to have more and more pain in his esophagus, therefore probably growth of the tumor. And that was related to when he found out on Wednesday of last week that his tumor marker went up slightly, very, very slightly. Actually, I think he had 3 markers or 4 markers were falling. One went up slightly, the one very, very slightly went up, and 2 were stable. Actually, there was 5, 2 were stable and 1 was better. So it was very, very little change, but he became a bit depressed. So that would be a mishap, what Hahnemann called a mishap. And this has to be addressed right away. Yeah, and I say Hahnemann gives a long list of mishap in the chronic disease, which you say should be removed as quickly as possible when they occur during the treatment of patient with chronic disease. As for intercurrent disease, such as acute infection, okay, so we don't need to talk about that, but the mishap must be dealt with very quickly. And my experience is in treating with patient with cancer, the mishap are often due to conflict of the patient that is sick with their family or their doctor, their oncologist, because they decide to follow alternative medicine. So the patient becomes confused, depressed, anxious, and then if they were responding to a remedy at that time, they will stop responding right on the spot when they become that anxious or depressed or confused. And I found out that in 90% of the time, the remedy they need at that moment is ignatia. And as soon as you give them the ignatia, their moods lift up and they start to respond to the remedy right away, right on the spot. So that would be a good, an important thing to pay attention to. Let me see, there's something else I want to tell you. Oh yes, what I want to tell you is the following. I'm not sure if it's here. Yeah, it's here. Hahnemann says in paragraph 285 of the Organon, Hahnemann says the cure of very old disease can be speed up by daily rubbing on back, thighs, and lower legs. Basically, in the chronic disease, it says you do 1 limb a day, and you change limb every day with the same medicinal solution found to be beneficial when taken internally. But one should, of course, avoid treating. So it's not, the idea is not to treat the part where the cancer is to use the remedy to increase the impact of the remedy on the patient. So that's what I was showing you here. He says, but if the disease organ is affected by the physician through the same, no. Yeah, so it says if you give it in sensitive spot other than the nerves of the mouth and the canal, then the curative effect are much increased. So in patient with cancer, I would certainly encourage this. The limbs are thus rubbed. This is Hahnemann talking. The limbs are thus rubbed with the solution may also be varied from one then another. Thus the physician will receive a greater action from the medicine, homeopathically suitable to the chronic patient, and can cure him more quickly than by merely internally administering the remedy. This mode of procedure has been frequently proved by myself and found extraordinarily curative, attended by the most startling good effect. The medicine taken internally being at the same time rubbed on the skin externally.
Am I supposed to come in today?
Yeah, so he says the same thing in paragraph 285. Okay, I think that's all what I want to talk about tonight. So maybe what we could do is open the microphone for question.
All right, so I'm screening for questions from attendees. Henrietta, Judy, Stephanie, Sue, we're not able to raise our hands, so just shout out if you have any questions.
Yeah, it's just from the headers.
Okay. I don't know where that's coming from. Let's see.
Why don't I, go ahead.
Definitely okay. Alright, sorry about that. Okay, there we go. So I was wondering, Andre, since nobody's asking at this point, I'm wondering if you would comment a little more what you mean by optimum pathology. Let's say I'm taking the remedy in liquid. You mentioned the toothpick method. Do I do that once a week? Do I only do that when there's market worsening, or is there how do you individualize that?
Well, the idea is you want to give the remedy without creating an aggravation, and the patient must take the remedy as soon as they need to take it. When do they need to take the remedy? When they stop responding to the previous dose. When they stop responding, or if they start to get worse. If they start to get worse, that means it's a bit too late. Repeat it earlier. So the idea of the when to repeat is as soon as they stop responding, improving. If you have an acute case or the pain is very high, you don't need to stop giving the remedy when the pain begins to be better. You can continue. You can continue to give the remedy until they're much better. So if it's a subacute, you could say take 3 doses of the remedy 2 hours apart, and I'll talk to you tomorrow or tonight, and you see how they are, and they say, oh, I'm much better. Okay, so you say, wait now, because you're improving, and as soon as you stop improving, or if you get worse, let's say they could wake up at night with pain, and then at that time they take a single dose of the remedy, or you could take 3 doses of the remedy 1 hour apart, or depending on the intensity, every 20 minutes until the pain goes away. So usually it takes 1, 2, or 3 doses for the symptom to go away. In the chronic case, it's not a good thing to say to a patient, take the remedy when the pain, let's say, of the cancer comes back, because when the pain of the cancer is back, it means the tumor has grown quite a lot during that space of time. So what I usually do is I find out a way of giving the remedy that will prevent the growth of the tumor. So that's why we use the blood test to be able to see that. So often the patient will have to take the remedy 2, 3, 4 times a day as a maintenance dose.
2, 3, 4 times a day in a low potency?
It depends. No, I usually start the patient with 200 because I don't know their level of sensitivity. So if I know the level of sensitivity, I would choose a better potency for them. But if they're a chronic patient, I'll give them a 200. I'll see how they react. And then I will have them take the 200 in different way of administrating the remedy. So it could be in water, it could be with a toothpick, it could be with pellets. And they take it as needed until they stop responding. When they stop responding, then we switch to the 1M, then the 10M, and the 50M, and so on. So as we go along, they just take the remedy as needed. So if a patient was taking, let's say, a 200, and they were on a maintenance dose, we know that when they took the remedy 3 times a day, the breast pain was gone. The tumor seems to be starting to recede. The patient energy was great. The patient was sleeping well. They had great appetite. And then they say, you know, the response is slowing down now, and then the pain is coming back. Then we, unless there's a change of picture, which is on, it's not it doesn't happen very often in cancer. Switch to the next potency, that would be the 1M. So if they were taking the 200 3 times a day as a maintenance dose, likely I would go to the 1M also 3 times a day. However, when I change to the 10M, it might be a bit less often because there's a big jump between the 1M and the 10M. So it might be a bit less often, but it's not unusual to have a patient with cancer to take a potency, let's say MM. Like this morning, I talked to a patient who was taking MM43H, I think. Yeah, 43H or 42H. So in other ways, the patient is taking a potency MM is 1,000,000, and 42H would be that means that we did a fluxion for 42 hours with that remedy. So
Yeah.
when they stop responding to 42H, then we go to 45H, and then we go to 48H, and we go up like this, usually by increment of 3 or 5 or 1, depending on the patient. And so they take the remedy as long as they're responding, and that will be for years. They'll be taking the remedy, and we always go up. We rarely go down, because we can always find a higher potency of the remedy or make a higher potency of the remedy by doing the fluxion method. Yes, Jeff.
So Andre, it's Susan Beal. Do you find across the board with your patients with a cancer diagnosis that they require relatively more frequent dosing than any other disease, or is that presumptuous?
You cannot say that, because it depends on the type of patient and type of condition they have. If you have somebody that has a progressive disease that is always getting worse from week to week, month to month, like cancer, for instance, or Parkinson's disease, the pathology in Parkinson's disease would be, or in patient with cancer would be almost the exact same type of pathology as in Parkinson's. So if you have a patient with Parkinson's, they'll tell you that every month they're worse. And they can even tell you that probably every week they know they're worse than the previous week, because the disease is slowly progressing. And it's enough, 1 week is enough for them to notice that they're a bit worse. Their dexterity is a bit less good, they drool a bit more, their balance is less good than a week ago, their concentration is not as good. So they can know from week to week the shaking is worse. And the pathology, I found out to treat those patients successfully, which I have shown already in Congress, that it can be done successfully, and they can become asymptomatic and don't need any more to take remedy after 5 or 10 years, is well, it will always be
Similar.
optimal. No, it will always be optimal, but in those cases you have to go to change the potency usually every 3 to 6 weeks. And you, over the years, so if you change it, let's say an average of every month, that means 12 different potency a year. And if you treat them for 10 years, that's 120 different potency you have to use over 10 years. So if you use the 200, that's 1, the 1M is 2, the 10M is 3, the 50M is 4, the CM is 5. So here's only 5, but you have to use 120 of them over 10 years to be able to cure them. So in those patients, because it's a always progressing disease, you have to keep that kind of pathology. Now, cancer is not always like this. Sometimes will have very slow growing cancer. Let's say some cancer of the prostate can be very, very slow, or some cancer of the breast can be very, very slow over many, many years. Or you can have very, very aggressive cancer, like a triple negative breast cancer can be very aggressive and grow very fast. So these, so it depends on the ascendancy of the disease. So the more faster that it grows, the more you have to adapt your pathology for the fast growth. And that's Herring said that. He says the medicinal disease, the medicinal disease must be proportional to the real disease. So if the real disease is progressing very, very fast, let's say somebody has a high fever with pneumonia and so on, you cannot come with 1 dose of 6C or LM1 and say, we'll see you tomorrow. Forget it, the patient will be in bad shape. But in those cases, now you use a 10M and you can put a 10M in the water and you can say to the patient, take the 10M every 20 minutes or half hour for 3 or 4 doses, and I'll call you in 2 hours, and the patient will be much better by that time. So the pathology is a question of experience. The more you treat people with very acute disease, the more you become sharp with your pathology and know what potency to use, so the patient can recover very quickly and without aggravation. And same thing if you have somebody with a subacute condition or a chronic disease that is progressing fast. So cancer can progress fast, and Parkinson can progress fast. So if you compare the pathology between cancer and Parkinson, it's probably exactly the same. Maybe even Parkinson takes more than average case of cancer, but some case of cancer take more often than a patient with Parkinson. Like right now I have a patient with Parkinson from Denmark. I think she takes a CM potency every 2.5 to 3 hours while awake. And that's the way she improved from week to week, month to month. She's better and better. Now she can ride a bicycle. She couldn't ride a bicycle before. Now she can walk long distance. Before she couldn't walk, she could only walk short distance. But week to week she improved. Month to month she's better. But to do this, you have to use an individualized pathology. So when people come in and treat these kind of patients and give 1 dose and say come back in a week or 2, they don't know what they're doing. Actually, they cannot have success. When I presented my case of Parkinson in Rio in 2015 at the Liga meeting in Rio, there was 400 physicians in the room, and I said, as anyone, and these were like a lot of experienced physicians from Germany, from Europe, let's say South America, or India, and I said, as anybody in this room has heard or seen or read about a case of Parkinson that has been recovered under homeopathy? And I waited. There was not a hand. So I repeat the question just to make sure. I said, I want to make sure that everybody heard the question. I want to know if anyone has ever heard, seen, or read a case from a colleague or in a journal of a case with Parkinson, well-diagnosed case of Parkinson that has recovered. Nobody, because I've never seen it myself from others. So if it works, because I didn't use the a strategy says give a dose and wait weeks. Actually, most of the patients that I see with Parkinson had been treated by homeopathy before they come and see me, and some of them, like I've seen some cases, have been treated for 2 years under homeopathy before I see them. And typically, what happens is they say, "Yes, I was treated by 1 or 2 practitioners over 2 years with homeopathy, and I've received 4 doses or 5 doses.
3 doses of remedy, yeah.
5 doses over 2 years. That means every 6 months they would get a dose." Now listen, the patient will never cure, and the proof is they came to my office, but now they're completely better. So the idea is not to have a preconceived idea of how many doses should be given. It has to be adapted to the patient. And that's exactly what Hahnemann teach. The remedy must be given appropriately to each patient. In a very, very urgent case, it could be every few minutes. In acute case, very acute case, it could be every 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. In subacute, it could be 1 or 2 or 3 hours. But so patient with fast progressing disease, that would include cancer, that would include Parkinson, that it has to be dosed appropriately.
So I have no trouble with that conceptually or actually even clinically most of the time, but when we're having those situations where we're repeating remedy frequently to keep the momentum and the appropriate direction, and I'm going to ask the question sort of actually knowing what the answer is going to be, but one of the conversations that keeps coming up in this realm is, okay, are we actually moving things in a curative direction, or are we palliating, and then they're going to fall off the bucket here, you know, however many lines, months, years, whatever down the road. And you know, intuitively the answer is you've got to assess the totality of the case with all the tools that we have. But do you have some sort of landmine, swamp avoiding pitfalls to just double check that that's not what we're doing?
Okay, so why would you have the first idea to start with?
Why would I have the first idea to start with?
Yeah, that you're suppressing or just palliating.
No, that you might be palliating. That because this individual patient requires this relatively aggressive pace of therapeutic intervention, are we indeed keeping up with the pace of their disease, their naturally occurring disease, the proportional to the disease and the pace of the disease, or are we, you know, falsely being
But why would you come with such a question?
I come with such a question because that's the conversation that I hear a lot when I talk to colleagues in the homeopathic community. Both.
Maybe what you should do to resolve the problem is look at cure case. So if somebody has a brain tumor and they take a remedy 6 times a day, and you do an MRI 6 weeks later and it's half the size, and you do another one 3 months later and it's gone, was that suppression?
No. What? Presuming he didn't turn into an axe murderer or something? No.
No, the person is very happy now, and she had glioblastoma multiforme, and they told her maximum 6 weeks, and it's probably 9 months now.
Yeah,
and
she's
so happy that she can speak, she can walk, she can talk, which she had difficulty doing before, and now she actually is traveling, I think, in Europe, which she was supposed to be there in April. So if that was suppression, well, she was well suppressed because no. So yeah, there are myths. There are myths in homeopathy, and it's important to approach those questions in a very objective way. And it's always the burden of the proof is on people that says it would be suppression. Show us to us, but I would come with another from another angle. It's no, here the person, like for instance, I had a patient with Parkinson, and I treated him for 4.5 years, and after 4.5 years, he decided to stop treatment, and that was in December, and he wrote back in July a letter and saying, please, Dr. Sain, can I be a patient of yours again? I didn't read the letter because when the patient writes a letter, the secretary opens the letter and puts it in the patient file, and the next appointment they will have, I will pick up the file and I'll see the letter that I need to read at that moment. So the letter was left in the patient's file unread. And so after a year, I noticed that the patient had not made any appointments, so I decided to call him. And I said, his name is Bill. And I said, Bill, you have not, no, his name is Jim. This is Jim. So I said, Jim, you have not made any appointment in the last year. Yeah, he says, I wrote you a letter 6 months ago in July. Oh, I said, let me go read the letter. And I said, of course, you can always be patient. And so what happened, he quit treatment because he was a musician, and I think he was in a heavy season of concert. And so he just stopped his appointment. And then his two daughters says, Dad, you were doing better when you did homeopathy. So actually, when we resumed treatment, we resumed treatment after a year of having stopped treatment. He had not lost any ground. So when his daughter says you were doing better with homeopathy, they didn't met that he was doing not well. They just met that he had not progressed in the last 6 months because he had stopped his treatment. So, but as soon as we resumed treatment, he got better. So let's say in December when he stopped his treatment, that was like 5 years ago, by the way, so it's a while ago. So when he stopped his treatment, he had maybe gained like 65% of his function that he had lost when I first saw him 4 years before, 4.5 years before. So when I resumed treatment after 1 year of not taking any remedy, he was still at 65%. He had not got worse. So, but as soon as we start treatment, he went to 70, and then he went to 75, and he went to 85, and he went to higher, maybe 90. So he continued to improve, but by stopping taking the remedy, did not regress. And that meant that the improvement that he had gone were actually curative.
Correct. Yes.
And enough curative that the disease had stopped progression. But the regression of the disease was not yet complete, so we have to pursue treatment.
So, Andre, why you comment before that you never go down, always up in pathology or in potency? And I'm wondering, is there a reason for going up instead of going down?
Well, Hahnemann went down,
Yeah.
and but Hahnemann didn't have that kind of case. And there were advances in homeopathy after Hahnemann, and a lot of the advance was the use of high potency, and part of the high potency was the fluxion potency. And so when you do fluxion, there's no hand to the process of fluxion. Finke, who invented the process of fluxion, says I cannot find a hand to it, and the more you do a fluxion of the remedy, the greater it becomes, the more there is power in it. So instead of going down, we just go up, up, up constantly by doing our own remedies. We don't do the remedy, we do our own potencies by fluxing them in our own laboratory here.
So you said that by going up, there's more power in the remedies. Could you elaborate? Because that's not something that I've been able to document in literature, that being the similarity of the remedy needs to be higher.
No, but yes, it's all over Hahnemann's. If you read Hahnemann, he will tell you all the time. If you potensize your remedy too much, you will have too big aggravation, and that's the reason that he developed the LM. And he tell you because it was too much aggravation. But there's a way to use high potency with no aggravation, or almost no aggravation. So, and the aggravation is mostly in patients that are very sensitive, but still, it's a reason to be careful to have aggravation. But the more you go up the potency, the greater is the dynamization of the remedy. Hahnemann tells you, he tells you exactly this. He says the more there is that not vital energy, he calls it spirit-like energy of the medicine is enhanced by the trituration and secretion process and serial dilution. So with the Finke process, with the fluxion process that was developed by Finke, it's a good way to potentize your remedy, and there's no limit to it. So if you If you do a fluxion for 100 hours, there's no limit to go for a fluxion of 200 hours, and you can do it for 500 hours. There's no limit in time. It's just a question of having the personnel to do that and a place to keep all those great number of potency, because here we have an enormous pharmacy. We must have about, oh my goodness, we must have about 15, 10, and 10, so probably 45,000 different remedies. And I would say of the 45,000 remedy that we have here, probably 40,000 are high potency. That means above 1M. And so we have a great collection, probably the biggest collection in the world of Finkies, likely the biggest collection in the world of Finky, bigger than the Finky cabinet that I took sample from. And yeah, we have lots of high potency from Finky, from Yennekin, from Swan, from Skinner, from Borkin Tafel, from Schmidt-Nagel, from Hall and Call. So we have like so many potency. But the one that we use the most are the 200 Dunhams. That's systematically we use those, and the Finkies. And once we reach the MM then we switch to MMF. MMF means MM 1H means 1 hour fluxion, and then we go to 2H, 3H, 4H. So MM3H would be a million potency of Finky that he made himself, and to which we have added 3 hours of fluxion.
And I guess my question went more to the similarity, not the power, not the essence for like potency of the remedy, but the similarity of the remedy to the underlying, energetic imbalance. Do we know that the higher potencies need to be more similar than, say, the lower potencies, which we always say, you go to a lower potency and you don't need to match the similarity as closely?
That's correct. The more is, the greater the degree of similarity of the remedy to the disease of the patient, the more you can go up the potency. And the less similar, the less they will respond to a high potency. Yep. So let's say the patient responds to a 200. The first dose, they respond to for a week. The second dose, they respond to 3 days. The third dose, 1 day. The fourth dose, they don't respond. You give a 1M, they don't respond. It means it's not the right remedy for the patient. The degree of similarity is too low. As you go up the potency, there's no response. But if
that is our clinical experience, but is that documented? Do we see that in writing anywhere?
Well, if I write what I just told you would be my clinical
anywhere else?
Anywhere else?
But Jeff, that's written in people talking about posology and assessing remedy response. Talking about that decreasing amount of time that the individual responds, and if you've got, just like Andre said, if you've got somebody that responds to the potency for a month and then 3 weeks and then 2 weeks, then then that's indicating that if we've assessed all things being equal, go up, and as he just said, if there's no response, then our assessment hasn't been accurate.
It means the degree of similarity is not high enough.
Right, and that's our clinical assessment, and everyone that's written about it in literature is commenting on their clinical experience. And that was
it would be clinical experience, and I've written extensively about it in the book of Felipe.
Which where is that book?
Well, I spent 6 weeks in the summer writing about it. I did the clinical case. I did 2/3 of the clinical case. I did 150 page, I think.
All right.
Andre, can I ask you a logistical question about when you're doing your fluxion in the clinic?
Sure.
The photographs and the videos and stuff that I've seen, you've got it all propped up in a little sink and the water's going. Do you ever have any reaction or anything from your staff or anybody? I mean, I know when for example, if I'm mixing an LM and taking it, I can remember one time I took a opium up to like an LM 12 or something, and my God, by the time I was done, I didn't hardly know what planet I was on. But do you have any difficulty with just that whole, multiple exposure to open medicines, particularly at that potency and stuff? And as I'm asking the question, the answer is going to depend. It depends on how similar it is to your people, right?
No,
and their sensitivity.
There'll be people that are sensitive. Like, yeah. I know of at least one vet technician and 2 veterinarians, at least, that cannot go in the room where the remedies are, or cannot be in a room if a remedy is administered to one of the animals.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will start to react to the remedy. Yeah. So it depends on the sensitivity of the person. So when we hire, we change a person of the staff this year, the one that would be doing the remedy. And before I hired her, I asked her how sensitive she was. She says, no, no particular level of sensitivity. So we did a tryout period. We had her work in the pharmacy, and I asked her if she felt anything when she opened the vials and things like this. She says no. And she's doing all the fluxion. Every day she's doing fluxion, and she's never reported any problem. And that was the case also of the person she replaced. So the person she replaced was also doing fluxion on a daily basis, and she never reported any problem. Yeah. But on the other hand, you can have a person that is very sensitive, and they will not be able to be in the room where the fluxion is being made.
Yeah, that's my thought, because I thought, geez, I'd like to make some of these, and then I'm thinking, holy moly, I can't hardly think how spun I'd be at the end of it. But
yeah, that's right. So you have to be not too sensitive.
And then do you use whatever water that Montreal provides you?
Exactly.
Okay.
Finky, look at the water he was using.
Oh my God, he used swamp water.
No, he was using water from in Brooklyn, which was rather good water that came from. Oh, it came from a reservoir. Yeah, yeah. It came from a. But I think it came from the. What's the mountain west of New York City? About 50 miles or 60 miles. The Catskill.
Yeah.
I think it came from the Catskill, but still, you look in the water and says, look, they're full of plankton and algae in this water, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the remedy. He says once the remedy is up at least to the 30 potency, he says it's very difficult, almost impossible to destroy the remedy. So then and the proof of the pudding is exactly this: is that the remedy have lasted through time. And when I was in Brazil 2 years ago at the Liga meeting, there was a group of Argentinian scientists that had tried to destroy remedies by exposing them to very high heat. So if I remember good, they were exposing the remedy to about 300 degrees centigrade, steam of 300 degrees centigrade, and they could not destroy the remedy. And they also froze the remedy at very high, a low temperature. I think it was minus 180 degrees centigrade, and they could not destroy the remedy. Mm-hmm. So Finky was pretty right when he said it's almost impossible to destroy a remedy after it is in the 30 potency. Pretty right.
I'll never forget. I've got a little collection of Finkies that actually came from Hal Williams, and my gosh, I'll never forget the first time I ever gave one. It was just electric. Oh my gosh, it was phenomenal. Sweet remedy. Yeah. Oh.
So how many Finkies do you have?
Oh, I'd have to look, but I probably got 50 or 80. I'd have to look. I'm
Okay.
actually at the point. Actually, I got more than that because they're in a. I've got some in a little case that I think's got 180 in them. But
if one day you make a list of them, I would like to have the list to see if we have all of them, because here I'm trying to collect them and preserve them. So far, we have probably 2,600 of them.
okay, I'll see because that was my thought about them too. Is you know they're not making them anymore, and you know they're beautiful.
Hold on a second. The Finky potency cannot be sold in the United States because they are not made according to the FDA, the pharmacopoeia.
Yeah.
However, you can buy them. You're not allowed to. They're not allowed to be sold, but you can buy them, and you can buy them from Europe. There's 2 laboratories in Europe that makes the Finky, and the Liga. I was told, I was there at the meeting of the Liga in 2015 in Rio. They said they will try to change all the pharmacopoeia in order that the Dunhams, the Finky, and the H potency be included. And if this is done, like the German pharmacopoeia, French pharmacopoeia, American pharmacopoeia, Indian pharmacopoeia, if they change it, that means you will be able to buy them in the States. I mean, be able to sell them.
Yeah, no, my comment about not making them anymore was more that the kit that I have is 100 and I don't know how many 100 and whatever years old. So that was it. That was my comment.
Yeah, see, Finky died around 1908, I think. So that means no Finky, all Finky are at least 110 years old, at least.
Yeah, that was more my comment about the physical kit that I've got.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the Finky is the following: is Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize, he was in Virginia in 2012, and he said that the older is the remedy, the better it was in his laboratory, because he can measure things. You know, when we give a remedy to patient, we don't have an experiment, a standard experiment where we can see a difference between one and the other, and have numbers, because we are working with many variable. But him working with no other variable, it's always the same experiment. He could measure changes, and he says that he had better response with remedy that he made 2 months ago than the same remedy that he made a week ago, and he had better response to the one that he made 6 months ago, and better response with the remedy that he made 18 months ago. And that is an interesting thing, because the Dunhams are from 1851s. The Yeniken that I use that are fabulous, they're from before 1848, and some of the Lacuses that we have is from 1828. So, and the Finkies are from anywhere from 1863 about to 1905. So they're old remedy, and even the remedy from Errol and Call would be from about 1920. That's when they close, I think. So all those remedies are getting better year by year.
Yeah, that's like the fine wine. I'll look and see what I've got and make a list for you and communicate that with you.
Okay, very good. And if you do have some we don't have, I would appreciate getting samples.
Absolutely.
And all those remedies are actually are all available in not all of them right now, because there's 2 labs in Europe that sells the Finky, but they will complete their collection when they decide to come this year. They'll come back this year to complete their collection, because they came about 5 or 6 years ago, and at that time I think I had about 1,800 Finkies, and they did all the copies, and they're selling those. But I have maybe more now. It's more than 1,800. It may be maybe 2,700 now Finkies. So they will come and get what they didn't have. And if you know anybody that has Finky, I have put the word out. If anybody has Finky, let me know, because I'll come and I'll check if it's any that we don't have to complete the collection, so we don't lose them in time. So they're preserved forever. Because when a physician dies and their pharmacy goes in the garbage, those remedies are gone forever.
That's why. And I had some remedies. You've probably looked at those though, because they ended up at Joe Lillard's lab at Washington Homeopathics, because we had some in the HMSSP collection as well. I think there were some in there.
Oh yeah? No, I don't know about those.
Yeah, I think they'd be in Joe's pharmacy.
I'll ask him. Not him, but
Well, yeah,
wife.
we can ask him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and Joletta, you have your hand raised. Do you want to ask something?
Yes. I was wondering, maybe in a prior lecture, Dr. Sain, have you explained the fluxion technique, and am I saying that correctly? And if it's on a recording, is it available?
I have presented at the National Center in Philadelphia in 2014. I presented in Rio in 2015, and I presented National Center, yeah, and I think it's on the website. Let me check if it's on the website.
The other place, you either did it for us or you did it for Whole Health Now as well.
Oh, there you go.
You had that video running with, in the sync with the. Was that for us, Jeff, or was that one that Kim did?
Oh, good question. It was one of those two, but yeah, he did show it there, and I believe Andre, you also do have some info.
Yeah, I'm just looking. I'm looking in my webinar file, and it was one that you did with the homeopathic treatment of patients with neurological disorders.
Okay, I'm looking. We didn't put the that article on the website. I'm just checking here. I don't see it. Well, it will be put in the future. I'm not sure why it's not there, or maybe I'm not reading it correctly. The article would be something of that nature. Let me check.
Yeah, this was a webinar that I don't know if it was on the Whole Health Now website or.
Let me see.
I can't remember what we did here with the AVH, Jeff.
The paper would be something of this nature: an important advance in the homeopathic treatment of patients with chronic serious pathology. So if you see a paper like this, let's see if we can put that in the internet and see if it comes out.
Oh, it was not in one of these webinars prior.
Yeah, it's here. It's here. Look, you have it here on the Homeopathy, National Center for Homeopathy.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. So you can listen to it here in 2015, actually.
Okay.
Other questions?
I believe that covers everything. Anyone else? Sue, do you have anything else, or anyone else on the panel have any other questions?
I do. Dr. Sain, what is the longest that you've had patients that you've been treating for cancer that they've been able to maybe stop the remedy and then there's still survival, or do most of them at some point need to start the remedy again?
No. Once the tumor is gone, it's done. Treatment is. I mean, they can stay a patient if there's a problem. They call, but if the tumor is gone, you might talk to them once or twice a year, but not related to the cancer. Relate to something else.
Okay.
Like I had a boy with a brain tumor, and he needed to go on a mission Now he's a teenager, but now you need to go on a mission in Africa, so you want to know some prophylaxis. But if he's able to go on a mission in Africa, it's because he has no more problem with his brain.
Mm.
But that boy, I just talk to them only once or twice a year.
Great. And
Actually, just before we go, I'm just on the Whole Health Now website too, Gilletta, and if you go and search webinars, there's a big section of webinars that Andre's done that has treatment of cancer and the neurological one that I was telling you about before as well.
Great, thanks.
So it would be here, right? Oh, here.
Yeah. Go to the S's. No, go to most recent and that QT. If you click on Q to T, that'll bring you up.
Q to T. Okay.
Yeah, and keep scrolling down. There you go. And the neurological one is the last. Yeah.
I see.
Oh yeah, because the neurological one would be because of there was a case of Parkinson in there probably.
Yeah, you did some Parkinson cases, and you had those videos in there that you were zooming.
That's right.
Yeah.
So is that free? I assume so, right?
I think that's on their free webinar series. Is all of these? That's the search. The rabbit hole I went down to find this one.
Welcome to a. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, there you go. You have it there.
Yeah.
great. And Susan, did you want to ask a question before we go?
No, I'm not all questioned out, but I'm done for the night.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Susan Hoare.
Oh, sorry.
I had a question pertaining to a case of mine. If the animal seems to be feeling better and clinically better, but the tumor is getting larger, do you think it's potency or remedy, or possibly both?
It could be either. You could have the right remedy, but the wrong pathology. So if you have the right remedy, it's enough for the person to feel better or the animal to feel better. But if the tumor is still growing, it means that the pathology is not right. So you have to increase the pathology because that means the disease is on the ascendance. And if you increase your pathology and you start to see a decrease in the rate of growth, then you're on the right track. That means you still have to continue to maintain a high pathology. High pathology with a higher pathology would be higher potency and or more frequent. Give the remedy more frequent. If on the other hand you give the higher remedy and the higher pathology, and the tumor still grows, it means you're palliating the patient, but you have to find a better remedy.
Okay. Good. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. So anything else, anyone? Because we need to let Andre go. It looks like we're just about up time-wise. So thank you, Andre. We appreciate your coming back.
Always.
And we will, please, Sue, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say we've got our next webinar on the 11th of October, and Gregory Pace is going to be talking posology and dosing and potency and liquid dosing and stuff.
Fantastic. Great. All right. So
Okay.
thank you all, everyone. Thank you, Andre. And we're
Thanks.
signing off, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your attention, and best to all.
All right. Thank you. All
Okay,
right.
good.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.